If you want to get better at Warzone, then this video is for you. I'm TCaptainX and I'm a 5+ KD player with a PR of 53 kills on Vandal Resurgence. And I'm going to walk you through everything in this video to get better at Warzone, including our settings.
Or I mean, Connor, Jaden said like.
Whole team, whole team, whole team.
I'm coming up, coming up.
No! Movement techniques.
It's fine, it's fine. I realize that doesn't really do much.
Oh!
Is you can't.
And proven methods to improve your aim. Oh, that was that was some ASMR right there. So let's jump straight in and start with the foundation of our Warzone gameplay, and that of course is going to be our controller settings. Now, if you are a mouse and keyboard player, I have a separate video that I already covered for that I'll link in the video description for you guys. So as we get started here, I just want to quickly preface and say that there's not necessarily a best settings for anybody, but my goal with this is to explain them to you guys so you can pick what's best for you. So starting in our controller settings here, I want to start with aiming and sensitivity related stuff first. So number one, I play on a 8.8 sensitivity, which is a little bit faster than the default 6.6, but there is a particular reason for that. So I have a taller right stick on my controller. This is a custom aim controller. It's got paddles. It's got different sticks that you can swap out, digital tap triggers, all that good stuff. But a lot of you guys might play with something called a Control Freak. And these are they're like 10, 15 bucks that you can pop on top of your analog stick and make it taller, just like this one. The difference with this is that it's built in. And because of that, I have more surface area to aim. And essentially I can have a higher sense because I have more room to aim. It's a little bit confusing, but hopefully that makes sense. Now, if you have no idea where to start when it comes to your sensitivity, here's a really quick test you can do to kind of find a good sensitivity for you. So pick a random target. I've got this sign here and just hip firing here. Start off to the side and try to flick and try to stop your aim right on the target. So you don't have to be perfect. Obviously, you know, I'm short sometimes, I'm long sometimes, but let's say every time you go way past, you might need to turn your sensitivity down. Or let's say every time you stop short of it, then you might need to turn your sensitivity up. This is a very rough test, but one thing I would recommend is when you are making changes, go in small increments and give yourself a few days to a few weeks before you make changes, as it takes a while for yourself to get used to these changes. Now, next, let's talk about ADS sensitivity multiplier. So mine is 0.85, and all that means is when I aim my gun, my sensitivity is 85% of what it does when it's hip fire. So hip firing is like this, and when I aim, it's a little bit slower. And that just allows me to be a little bit more accurate when I'm tracking, especially at long range. But my sense is still fast enough that if someone's running across my screen in very close quarters, like right in front of me, I can still keep up and track with them. Overall, my recommended range when it comes to sense is between 6.6 and 10.10. There are, of course, a lot of players that play super high sense like the Max 2020 and are absolute demons, but I'd only recommend that if you are a very experienced player. Now, just to cover a few more things quickly here, sensitivity multiplier, this is personally up to you. I don't mess with this, but you can change like your sense when it comes to vehicles and things like that. Vertical aim axis, that's just if you play inverted, where you push up to go down and down to go up. If you're like more of an old school gamer, you've been gaming for a while and you're used to those controls, then this is where you would change that right there. Now hit R1 and go over to the advanced tab. I want to really quick talk about aim assist. So number one, if you're a controller player, please play with aim assist on. It is your greatest strength, especially in close quarters. But when it comes to aim assist type, what is best? Overall, I think default is the best option. There are some people that will argue that Black Ops is better, but from testing that I've seen, they're pretty much identical. Now, precision and focusing, not very many people use these. Basically what these do is gives you a smaller range of your aim assist of when it starts to kick in. It's supposed to be a little bit stronger, but for the most part, almost everybody is playing on default currently. Now, I want to quickly explain how aim assist works in Call of Duty. So first, you have your standard aim assist slowdown, and the way this works is as I approach this target, my aim slows down. So see right about around this red line, my aim is going fast. I'm not changing how much I'm pushing on my right stick, and then it slows down. And basically what that is when you get close to a target, your sensitivity is going to slow down. But there's also an additional layer of aim assist called rotational aim assist, and that is as long as we are pushing on our left stick, your aim is actually going to rotate towards the target. So I am not touching my right stick, but my aim is adjusting for this target slightly here. And I'm going to see if I can make this target move here, and watch how as I'm making it move, see how it kind of dragged with it there? See how it dragged? I'm not touching touching my right stick. My aim went from here all the way to about here, I think, and I never touched my right stick, all because I had pressure on the left stick. So what I'm saying is just don't stand perfectly still. When you're aiming and shooting people, just keep a little bit of pressure on that left stick, and you're going to get that extra strength of aim assist called rotational aim assist. Now, next, let's talk about the aim response curve type. So the default is standard, and the way standard works is pretty simple here. As we barely move our right stick, your aim is slow, and then it ramps up the more you push it. So when you go all the way to the edge, it's faster. So that's what standard is. It's like a standard, nice, even curve ramp up. Dynamic, though, which is what the majority of the top players are playing on, including myself, is similar. However, it is going to be even a little bit slower when we're just barely touching that right stick. And what that allows to do is it allows you to be more accurate at long range when we're trying to make those small micro corrections. But dynamic ramps up really fast still, and this is great for close quarters so that we can very quickly change our direction when we're moving in close quarters. So it's kind of like best of both worlds. Now, of course, there is the linear, and linear has no ramp up. It is a straight 1-to-1. The problem with linear, in my opinion, is that unless you're on a higher sensitivity, you can't turn around very quickly in close quarters. But a lot of people do say linear is fantastic for muscle memory aiming. Now, a few more settings to cover here. The ADS Sense multiplier focus. This has to do with when you hold your breath with a sniper scope, you can change your sensitivity while you're doing that. Personally, I like to leave it the same for muscle memory, but you could turn this down slightly if you wanted to. ADS sensitivity transition timing is, I have it on instant, and I'm going to explain why I recommend this. Whenever you aim your gun, if you are playing with an ADS sensitivity multiplier other than 1, so remember mine was 0.85, meaning when I aim my gun, my sensitivity slows down. As soon as I press L2, my sense changes to that new multiplier, and that's because I'm on instant. Gradual, it's a ramp up to that change, and then after zoom, that effect doesn't take place until you're all the way zoomed in on your gun. Now, custom sensitivity per zoom, this is where you can change your sense for every different type of optic. I don't recommend this because I think this is bad for muscle memory purposes. Now, let's talk about inputs dead zone, and this is very important. And I want to focus on the right stick minimum. This has to do with stick drift. Overall, the rule of thumb is you want this as low as it can go with no stick drift. So I play on 0.03 and I have absolutely no drift on that. But let's go all the way down to 0 and see what my controller looks like here. So I'm not touching my controller at all, and you're going to see how my center dot is moving just slightly. That is stick drift. And I've had this controller for about 7-8 months, and on 0.03 I get absolutely nothing. Now, if you are probably above about 0.10 and you are still getting stick drift, you might really want to consider trying to invest in a new controller, just because it's very hard to be very accurate with your aiming if you're on a higher dead zone. Now, when it comes to the left stick, the reason mine's a little bit higher is just because for tuning purposes, when you're tuning your guns, it's a really touchy there. So I've got mine a little bit higher just for that. When it comes to the maximums, I recommend just leaving these all the way at 9.9. That way you have a full control of your speed and whatnot. Now, if you do not have digital tap triggers, so I have mouse click triggers on my aim controller, meaning it's like a mouse click. If you have a normal trigger, you can turn the sensitivity of these down, meaning it'll be more sensitive, and you can make it quicker to shoot if that's something you want to do. So now let's get into some movement settings, and let's start with our button layout. And this is going to depend completely on, number one, how you hold your controller, and two, the type of controller you have. Myself, like I said earlier, I'm playing with an aim controller that has 4 paddles on the back. And what these paddles allow me to do is I have all of these buttons here bound to these paddles. So my bottom right is going to be my circle or slide. Bottom left is jump or X. Top right is triangle, which is plate or switch weapons. And then my top left is square or reload. But you don't have to have paddles to have a good movement. And so let me show you some other options. So number one, if you do like to stick with that default button layout, something you can do is called playing claw. And if you look at my controller cam here, what this is I'm using my right index finger to hit all of these buttons. And the reason this is important is that it allows me to keep my thumb on the analog stick, but I can still jump, dive, do all those things while never taking my thumb off the analog stick, so I can aim and move at the same time. Now for myself, the paddles allow me to do that because I can jump, dive, and not have to do that. Claw for me is very uncomfortable, but there are a lot of great players that do play claw. Now, if claw is just too awkward for you, if you can't do it, that's perfectly fine. Go to edit button layout, go to your button layout preset, and I highly recommend playing on bumper jumper tactical. This is a little bit weird to get used to, but a lot of great players play on this if you have just a regular controller without paddles. What this does is it makes our L1 jump and it makes our R3 our crouch or dive. And again, we're able to jump and shoot, and we can dive and shoot and do all that stuff. Again, a little bit weird to get used to, but once you do, you can have great movement with this button layout. Now, also while we're we're here, something I want to talk about is you can flip your L1 and L2 or flip your triggers with your bumpers if you have a regular controller. And this just means you're going to be a little bit quicker with shooting because you're going to aim with L1 and shoot with R1. And there's not going to be that trigger pull you have to worry about. Now, I do get asked about my controller all the time, so I do want to quickly explain my setup on aimcontrollers.com. So I use a custom PS5 controller here. When you get these are going to come with, number one, the 4 paddles that you can reprogram to any button you want. Also comes with the active triggers, which I actually don't have yet on my controller because I've had this controller for like 7 or 8 months so far. This allows you to toggle on and off between the digital tap mouse click, or if you want to use a full trigger pull, like if you're going to play a different game like a racing game and you want that full trigger pull, you can turn them on and off with the click of a button. So that starts at $169. I know it is a little bit pricey. Code TCaptainX will save you 10% off, but I've had this controller. I've used like 4 or 5 different custom controller brands, and AIM has by far been my favorite. They also come with a lifetime warranty. So if any of the custom parts break, you can send it in and they're going to replace it for free for you. So the beginning part, I'm going to skip through this, as this is a lot of just like design stuff, and this is just, personal preference. Now, digital buttons, you can actually make the buttons on the front of the controller digital tap. I don't use that on mine because I use the paddles instead. So if you want to save the money, I wouldn't worry about this. It's $35. It's an option though if you want to, especially if you play claw, that might be good. Now, aim sticks, this is very important. So the right stick, I play with a PS high stick. You can also pick whatever color you want. And my left stick, I play with a small. However, one of the great things about AIM is they're going to send you all the different stick heights. So you can change them and swap them yourself if you don't like it. You're just picking which one you want them to start you with. And this is what I recommend, is high on the right, small on the left. Now, going over to the AIM grip, I do recommend getting this grip because it's going to give you like a rubbery tactile surface on the back. And it just makes it so when your hands get sweaty, it's way easier to hold the controller. It's not going to slip or anything like that. Now, I also do have smart bumpers, which means I have the digital tap bumpers. So my L1, R1 are super clicky and fast and responsive, and I like having that a lot. Not super necessary, but again, if you've got the $34 to spend, I highly recommend that. And then lastly, I do play with my vibration motors out. Makes the controller a little bit lighter, and I don't use vibration, so it's only extra $5. So once you go to checkout, if you do use code TCaptainX, it will take 10% off for you, and it does support me as well. So that would bring this controller with shipping to a total of $230. Like I said, it's not something that you absolutely have to get by any means. You can definitely be a great player without one, but if you're going to invest, if you are serious about getting better, it's probably the best thing you can invest in as a controller player. So back to our controller settings here, still in the default controller tab. Let's go down to the gameplay section here. So ADS behavior, highly recommend doing hold and not toggle. Automatic sprint, this is a very kind of controversial subject, and let's talk about it. I play with auto tac sprint on. What that means is as soon as I press my left stick, my guy's going to go straight into his tactical sprint, which is the fastest sprint you have when your gun goes all the way up. Now, a lot of people will say, oh, TCap, I can't do it. I can't use shotguns. And once you get used to it, I think this is the best setting when it comes to movement, just because you're going to be so fast going in and out in close quarters. But let me talk about how to get used to it and some tips I have for this. So let's say I'm coming around a corner here and I don't want to, have that sprint to fire time where my guy is bringing that gun down. You can still walk by not pressing all the way in your left stick and not, activate that sprint. So that is one thing to get used to, is find that sweet spot of where your guy can walk without activating it. And especially if you're pushing left and right in strafing, you don't have to worry about that. So for example, if I'm coming around this corner, I can sprint up to it and turn early, and I can strafe out, and that way I don't have to worry about that sprint to fire time. Now, if you just absolutely hate auto attack sprint, go to advanced and scroll. We're going to scroll way down here near the bottom here once we get in the movement behaviors. On tactical sprint behavior, you can make this as single tap run, and what that does is just by pressing L3 once, so pressing in on that left analog stick, is going to make your guy tac sprint just from one tap. So this is a great setting. It's a little bit easier to get into your tac sprint. I still think auto tac sprint is best, but if you hate it, this is what I recommend. Now, a few other settings I want to cover really quick while we're here. Equipment behavior, I use hold. That means you have to hold R1 if you're going to throw something. So I'm holding R1 to throw my grenade, whereas toggle would be you tap it and then you hit it again to throw it. But I think hold is easier personally. Weapon mount activation, I use ADS plus melee. So that means I have to aim my gun and then I hit R3, which is my melee to mount. I don't like the auto mount option. There's an option in there that you can use to make it so, let's see, I think it's just ADS, or you can double tap ADS. Not a big fan of those. I think double tap ADS is a good option, but ADS is, you're going to accidentally mount on things way too much. Now, interact and reload behavior. This is very important, especially when it comes to Warzone. Highly recommend doing prioritize interact, and here is why. When you can interact with something like a door or let's say a loot box, I have to just tap square, which is either square or for me, my paddle, and it's going to open it. But let's say my gun needed to reload. So if I tap square, which is both reload and interact, it's going to prioritize interacting. So that means it would loot stuff, and you can, let's say there's loot on the ground, I can just tap square and I'm going to very quickly loot. It makes looting so much faster. But let's say this door is open and I want to reload and not interact with the door, or let's say I'm over a bunch of loot on the ground and I want to reload and not pick something up. I hold square and that's going to reload. So basically you're going to hold to reload, tap to interact. And then lastly, armor plate behavior, highly recommend doing apply all, as it just makes plating a lot faster. Now let's go over to the advanced tab and let's scroll way down here. We're going to skip past gyro aiming, as this is not something I use. Let's go to the movement behaviors here. So when it comes to all these mantle settings, I highly recommend turning all these off, as it's going to decrease the chance of accidentally mantling and accidentally like grabbing a ledge or something like that, which can totally mess you up in a gunfight. Now, invert, slide, and dive behavior. This is a very important setting, and I highly recommend changing this from standard to inverted. And here is why. When we have it on inverted, it makes it so you only have to tap circle once and your guy is going to dive. And overall, diving is a lot more useful than sliding in this game. You would hold circle to slide while you're sprinting. And I'm going to talk about this later in our movement technique section, but basically it just makes it so you have to very quickly dive. Super easy when it's on this setting. Now, plunging underwater, this is actually important, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later in movement techniques, but plunge freely is what you need to do a certain movement technique when getting out of water. And again, I'll talk about this later. Parachute auto deploy, I like to leave this off simply for the fact that way I can get lower to the ground before pulling my chute. But if you like to splat a lot, if you're Tim the Tatman, you might want to turn that on. Sprinting door bash allows you to sprint straight through a door. So if you have this setting on, you can run and your guy will open a door, whereas if it was off, you would stop and then you would have to manually open the door. Ledge hang mantle behavior. This means that if you are hanging on a ledge, you have to press your jump button to get up the ledge, whereas movement has to do with your stick. I think this is kind of personal preference, but it's not really a mechanic I use very often. A few more quick settings I want to cover here, then the combat behaviors here. An important one is weapon mount movement exit. Make sure the delay is on short. That way you can very quickly unmount. So if we are mounted on something here, it allows me to, as soon as I un-ADS, it just makes it quicker and snappier to get unmounted if, for example, someone was coming up and I needed to adjust my aim or something. Now, depleted ammo weapon switch. I find this one actually very important. I like to turn this off, and the reason for that is if I run out of ammo and then I hit weapon switch, it had already started to switch and then I switch back if it was on. So I like to just hit it myself and I turn it off. I don't use C4, but C4 with it, the quick detonation allows you to double tap your interact button, which is square, and you can quickly blow it up. A few more settings here. Vehicle behaviors on short delay and free look makes it a little bit easier to look around and things like that. And this is just the overlay behaviors. Now, really quickly, I do want to touch on my audio settings. However, I'm going to push you guys towards a different video from my friend Art is War, as it is his audio settings that I'm using. And there's just no point of me trying to explain this when he has a very in-depth video on it. But in summary, this unfortunately is only available on PC, but we use a custom config settings, which basically goes in and it tunes a bunch of different EQ frequencies to try to make footsteps a little bit louder. We also use a program called Hasuvi, which is a surround sound system. And this is what allows me to turn my front speaker way down, meaning I actually don't hear my own gunshots and my own footsteps, or at least they're very, very soft. And it makes it so I can hear other noises around me much better. It's a little bit confusing of a setup to do, I will not lie, and Art actually set up mine for me. He has everything on his video for free to do yourself, but if you can't figure it out, you can book a session with him through his Discord and he will do it for you at a small cost. Now, if you're on console and you're like, TCap, what the heck do I do? I'd probably recommend going with, I believe you don't have the PC one, but I think it's the TV one. This is the tightest EQ range and it just kind of compresses a lot of the noises. It makes footsteps as loud as possible on that setting here. The other things when it comes to your master volume is your master volume can be left relatively high, but very important that you turn your music down, turn your dialogue very low. Effects has to be 100. Effects absolutely needs to be on 100 because this is what footsteps come through. Voice chat, this is personal preference, just it depends. And then cinematics and war tracks, that doesn't really matter that much. Now, when it comes to my graphic settings, I'm going to go through this ultra quick as I have another video that is up to date with all this stuff. And I'm just going to point out a few things really quick. Number one, if you're on PC, make sure you're on full screen exclusive. I'm only on borderless because I'm in the middle of recording this video, but exclusive is much, much better here. I'll scroll through and just show here. These are my display settings here really quickly. When it comes to quality, I do play on a 1440p monitor. I'm just going to, again, scroll through this stuff, but I'm on a very high-end PC with a 4090 and an Intel i9 13900KS. So just because I have these settings doesn't mean it's necessarily exactly what you want to copy. Again, I explain this a lot more in my other video. However, when it does come to field of view, this is a very important setting. I want to talk about this. I have a whole video video on this as well, but quickly, overall, I do recommend playing on 120 FOV is what I've always played on, but I think anywhere from about 100 to 120 is a great range. If you're coming from console and you're used to playing on 80 FOV, absolutely nothing wrong with going to about 100, 105 and slowly working your way up until you get used to the higher one. A lot of great players play on 110, 115, so it's, again, you play what you want. ADS field of view, very important that you play on affected though. This is what keeps that field of view wide when we aim our gun. And then for weapon field of view, I keep that on wide as well. It just makes it a little bit wider again. And then when it comes to all of your camera movement stuff, make sure you have this on least. Now, one thing I get asked about constantly is what color settings I use and why does my game look so vibrant? And I'm going to explain how I do that here. So in my the video control panel on PC, adjust desktop color settings here. On my digital vibrance, I have this cranked all the way to 100%. So this is like black and white. This is cranked. Just makes the game look way more vibrant. I would recommend at least 75, but I like it all the way up and it just really makes colors pop. Now, one other thing you can do is in your interface settings here, scroll down here until you get to your color customization. And on your color filter, filter 2 will also make some more colors pop a little bit better. And then change that to world and then make your intensities 100. I also get asked about this a lot, why my UAV pings are pink. And I just think it's easier to see pink than red. So I have my enemy pings on my interface changed to pink. And again, I just think it's more visible. Also, one other thing that's very important to talk about on the interface is scroll down until you get to center dot. Make sure your center dot is on, and I recommend using largest. What this does is, like you've probably seen, is that center dot is just very large and easy to see, and this is very important for centering, which is something we'll talk about a little bit later in the video. So now let's actually talk about some movement techniques that we can use and apply in-game. And first, I want to talk about diving versus sliding. So diving is more of a defensive technique. It's not something, let's say there's a guy standing here. We don't really want to dive out and then try to shoot him because there's a delay when we hit the ground to when we can pull our gun up. But let's say there's a guy that comes around the corner and maybe I'm in the middle of a reload and I don't have time to finish the reload and I need to get away. When we have that inverted dive setting on, I can very quickly dive to cover, finish my reload, and then reach out. Now, sliding is more of the offensive technique. I don't think sliding is very good defensively, but let's say I dove away here and I want to reach out. I can get that head start and start my sprint very early, and I can actually use sliding as an aggressive technique challenge. It's just very important that you start it way earlier than you did like a slide cancel back in Warzone 1, because there is a delay for when I can shoot my gun. It's about a half second or so. So if there's a guy right here, I need to start my slide back here. That way I can start shooting as I'm coming around the corner. Now, of course, the other most simple and important technique when it comes to challenging around a corner is the jump chow. This is kind of like the oldest technique in the book, but in Warzone 2 and in Modern Warfare 2, we have a big ADS penalty. Our aim down sight speed is very slow when we're jumping. So just like with sliding, it's very important we start that jump and aim much earlier. If I know there's a guy right here, I don't want to jump here because then I'm totally exposed from here to here as I'm trying to aim my gun in. Instead, I want to start my jump back here. That way, by the time I'm coming around the corner, my guy's already aimed in because every second matters. Now, one of the other like oldest techniques in the book is the drop shot. Drop shotting is very simple. It's where you just go straight to a prone, but you have to know when and where to use this. So let's say a guy came through that door. I should not drop shot this because all I'm doing is I'm putting my head in the front of my body and it's very easy for them to hit drop shots. But let's say I'm running out here and then bam, there's a guy that pops out right in my face and I am super close and I kind of got caught off guard. The drop shot is sort of a defensive and offensive tactic where if I get caught off guard, I can drop shot in close quarters, because the reason drop shotting is so good is it shifts your body down so much that they have to adjust their aim. Whereas if I'm really far away and I drop shot, they only have to adjust their aim a little bit. But if they're right next to me, let's say there was a guy's head right here, they have to aim way down, and that little extra split second can be enough that you can win the gunfight. Now, a few tips when it comes to drop shotting. So again, I play with auto tac sprint on. One thing that I would recommend is as you're sprinting to pull pull back on the left stick. That way you don't die, because that would defeat the purpose. So we're going to pull back and then hold our circle or our crouch button. Okay. Now this also goes into snaking, and snaking is a little bit more advanced technique, but again, something that's been around for a while. And snaking is where we are rapidly proning behind cover. The reason this is good is if you do this really fast, and especially if it's on something that is where only your head is showing, where you're on a head glitch, when you do it so quickly, the enemy can't even see you basically, but you can see them. And this allows us to get information as we are doing this. And essentially all we're doing is we're pulling back on the left stick and then we're holding the prone button to do this. It takes a lot of time to get used to this, and I recommend just going into like a private match or multiplayer and just trying to practice this. Now, another thing I want to talk about is, let's say there's like an enemy over here and I need to maybe reload, or I need to put plates on here. I'm in multiplayer, so I can't show plating, but instead of just hiding here and trying to reload over here and put plates on and stuff, instead, while you're doing that, you can be snaking and getting information. It's very important that you don't just stay here and give up and, you know, hope they don't push you. Instead, keep peeking over this and using snaking or shouldering, which shouldering is the same concept, but we're just peeking out. So I could be, as I'm plating here, I'm peeking out and I'm getting information to see if I'm getting pushed or not. So now I'm on a different map. That way I can explain how this water mechanic works. And this is the Shotzi jump. And it's been, I believe Shotzi is the one that kind of like founded this. So normally when you're coming out of water, you have to like come up and you have to mantle, and it's really slow to get up and it's really easy to get killed. But as long as you have my same mantle settings and then that plunge freely setting on, we can do what's called the Shotzi jump, and you can get out of water super quick. The way this works is you're basically just going to swim and spam jump as you're coming up out of the water, but it's very important that you can't go on the edge because you're going to mantle. So we have to go away from the edge. So let's see if I can do it. So we're going to look straight up, spam jump, and see how I got up super quick without mantling. I kind of skipped that mantle animation. So again, we're going to spam jump. And see how I got straight up? You can basically just like dive out of the water like you're like a dolphin, and you can just, you know, surprise people. And think about Vondel, there's a ton of water. Same with Ashika and Almazra. It's just a nice little mechanic to know how to do. So now let's talk about some techniques to improve our aiming. And number one, the most important thing in COD is going to be our centering. So if we have that large center dot, like I talked about earlier, it makes it a lot easier to visualize and see this. So let's say I'm approaching this doorway here, and maybe I hear some people in here. What I don't want to do, and what I see a lot of bad players do, is they run up and their aim is down at the ground. So when they come in, now they have to adjust their aim and fix it, or they're running maybe even like this, but most people tend to run low for whatever reason. So number one, when you're running, keep this center dot at chest level. So if a player were to be in here, you want to keep that aim even. That way you don't have to adjust your aim up and down. You're already there. But also, instead of, let's say I'm coming into this doorway, I don't want to be aiming at the wall because a player is not going to be there. I want to keep my crosshair right on the edge of this wall, and as I come around, my center dot is clearing through here. So I don't want to come in here like this and then turn. I want to come around and keep that center dot hugging the edge of that wall. That way, if there is a player here, bam, all I have to do is aim, and it's basically just speeding up that aim process as I'm already having my crosshairs where somebody's likely to be. So just to give you more of an idea, as I'm running around the map here, just watch my crosshairs here, and I'm having my crosshairs on areas where people are likely to be as I come through here. And same with, I'm also going to start trying to like predict and maybe start to pre-aim different areas as I come through. And again, having that first extra leg up when it comes to getting your first shots is very important here in winning gunfights. I also want to retouch on, we talked about this earlier, but when it comes to getting aim assist, when we are aiming, to not stand still and shoot. Always make sure we are strafing, especially in close quarters, and pushing that left stick all the way left or all the way right. That way we're taking advantage of that rotational aim assist. Now, if you were to ask me what is my best and strongest skill set in Call of Duty, I would say it's probably my aim, especially my long range tracking. So I'm going to explain to you guys how I practice my aim, and something that I do on a daily basis. Now, you do have to have multiplayer to do this, unfortunately. So if you only own Warzone, I apologize. We're going to go into multiplayer and go into a private match here. We're going to create our own private match. I recommend doing free for all this, but could do team deathmatch if you wanted to as well. Now, first, when it comes to weapons, I normally do this on a small map. So I normally just like to focus on SMGs, but we can also do the same thing on a larger map and use assault rifles or even snipers. So have an overkill class that has 2 SMGs. The mini bot is really good because it's a really big magazine. And I do recommend that you have fast for your perk package. Scavenger is a must, fast hands, and quick fix. This is the perk package I'd recommend when we are practicing, not for in-game. So go to our game setup here. And when it comes to our map, I think this is by far best on shipment just because it's the smallest map and we can get the most action in a short amount of time. In our game rules here, starting in game, you can set time limit and score limit to whatever you want. If you want to keep it to a certain limit, do that. Normally, I just crank it up really high and I just quit whenever I feel like quitting. You can turn the match start time down to 5 seconds so it makes things a little bit faster. Tab over to player. Keep lives unlimited. Turn your max health to 300 since that's what Warzone health is. And also, I recommend turning your health regen to fast. Now, I don't recommend turning Arbor on because it's just it's too confusing and it takes too much time to have to plating up between fights. Tab over to team here and go down to the mini map. This one is personal preference. You can leave it off or you can turn it to constant or directional so you know where the people are. Then tab over again to gameplay here on spawn ammo max. Make sure this is on max. If you want even more practice, I recommend turning health steal on. This is basically going to be when people do damage, it's going to actually give them health back and it makes the time to kill even longer, which for practicing your aim is a good thing to do. And then also turn your kill streaks off. That way you just don't have to worry about them. And then lastly, we're going to go to the bot setup and turn this to recruit and then turn this all the way to the max, which is 5. And then we can queue into the game. Now, if you are learning a new sensitivity or you're learning a new button layout, you've changed a bunch of settings, just go in and kill bots. It's as simple as that. But if you're used to your settings here and you're not like an ultra beginner, then the number one thing I can recommend people to do to improve your aim is go into your controller settings and turn your aim assist off. This is something I do every single day. I go in and I kill about at least 50 bots to often about 100 or so, depending on how much time I have. And I do this as my warm up. It takes about 10, 15 minutes at max, and I kill bots with aim assist off. Once you get a feel for killing bots with aim assist off, once you've done your 50 or 100 or whatever you have time for, then go back in and kill at least like 10 to 15 with it back on, and you will feel an absolute massive difference in your aim and just you really get a good feel for how sticky and strong aim assist is. And again, make sure when we're doing this that we are strafing. Do not just stand still and shoot. Make sure that you are always pushing on your left and right stick and going back and forth so that we are taking advantage of that rotational aim assist. Now, if you want to work on your long range aim like your assault rifles or sniping, I think Tarak is the best map. And same concept, start with your aim assist off, make sure you have the right class, and then go in and have at it, and then turn your aim assist on at the end and then feel the difference. So even if you have perfect aim, perfect movement, at the end of the day, game sense and decision making is more important than all of those in Warzone. But how do you get better at this? And this is kind of a complicated answer, but I'll explain how I went from just like an above average player to someone that actually held a world record in Warzone for a short time until I got broken. Number one, watch people that are better than you. This can be as simple as watching other streamers, other YouTubers who are good at the game. But when you're doing so, try to put yourself in their shoes and think about the decisions that they're making and ask yourself, why are they doing the things they do? Number two, play outnumbered. In my opinion, the best way to get better quickly in Warzone is to put yourself in bad situations. And with the new dynamic resurgence timer, you can play solo versus duos, solo versus trios, etc. in resurgence, and you can still respawn in after you die like you're in solos. And this is perfect so that you can play outnumbered. It forces you to think about your positioning, think about your rotations, and how you engage in gunfights a lot more than if you were just playing regularly. Once you can start to handle some 1v2s, you'll find yourself playing at a much higher level in normal team-based modes when you're just playing with your friends and teammates. And finally, my third tip, have a good attitude. What do I mean by this? If you scream and blame the game every time you die, blame skill-based matchmaking, say everyone else is cheating that you die to, you'll never get better. Instead, when you die, accept it and ask yourself, what could I have done better there? Sometimes there is nothing you can do, and that's okay. But a lot of the time, you may have gone over aggressive. Maybe you put yourself in a bad situation. Maybe you just missed some shots. When you accept that you're not perfect and that you're gonna mess up and you actually learn from your mistakes, you'll notice you're gonna get a lot better, but also you're gonna have more fun. So guys, that's gonna wrap things up. I hope you found this video helpful. If you're new here, consider leaving a like and subscribing for more content just like this. If you want my full graphic settings video, I'll link it right here. And I'll have a bunch of other videos linked in the description as well in case you're looking for them. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great rest of your day. See you in the next one.